This week, we continue our Made in Haverhill series focusing on local manufacturing with the second installment of our tour of Mason Hamlin Piano Company. In part one, we saw the skilled craftsmanship that building the base skeleton of a piano entails. This time, we'll watch as that wooden skeleton acquires its musical voice and receives the fine finishing touches that make a Mason Hamlin piano worthy of the finest concert halls in the world.
So you saw one close to, a plate ready for stringing. This is now what a strung grand piano looks like. So you see all the wires in place, the tuning pins are in place, the felt is in place, all of the things are done. These are strings, and I'm doing it in a way that I don't touch it with my skin because you'll make rust spots. These are the tuning pins. These are the hitch pins. Right? This is what's called an aliquot. It tunes the back side of it in an interval in relation to the front side.
And the inside, the grain on the inside is so beautiful.
Yes, now this is what's called the Cambridge series, and this is what's called a Macassar ebony. It'll also be on the bottom of the lid, and it will be on the fall board. Sometimes you make this on the entire piano, but this is what's popular now for a case. Now we're going to put an action into the piano. An action is the assembly of keys and various parts, so when you press a key, the piano makes a sound. The first step of putting in a keyboard and action in is to fit the keyboard itself. The keyboard comes just like you see it on a panel, and so we have to fit the key frame to the key bed so that it's a one-to-one fit. Now, once we do that, we'll position it and do all of those things, and then we'll move on and set a top action on top of it at all of the correct elevations and what have you. Once a keyboard is set into the piano, we now need to set an action on top of the keyboard. So here what we're doing is we're putting an action on. We've built up the cleats, and what's important is the height of the centers and the location front to back on the keyboard, which has all been done now. Here what we're doing is we're gluing hammers onto hammer shanks. The hammer is what actually strikes the string. The shank is what transmits the energy to the hammer. We're gluing the hammers onto the shanks and in the right position so everything lines up nicely with the strings. Regulating is adjusting the action so that it all functions correctly. You could view it as like timing in an automobile. So here, for instance, this is a let-off regulation, and what it means is that the hammer action quits driving the hammer 1/16 of an inch away from the string. And so this screw is turned to control that. So when the action goes back in the piano, it will function correctly, but out here we can reach everything to work on it. Once the action regulation is completed, now we need to voice the instrument. At this point it plays well, but it doesn't sound very good because the hardness of the hammer isn't quite right. If the hammer is too hard, it's a harsh, unpleasant sound. If it's too soft, it's not very powerful and not very well defined, and so the voicer, or the tone regulator, basically works with the hammers until a musical sound is achieved throughout the instrument. What you see here is he's needling a hammer.
What you're doing with the needle is you're stabbing the fibers, so you're manipulating the tone. There's the pitch aspect of it where you're getting everything to proper pitch. And then you want to get the color right. You want to get a nice balance, nice rich bass, and then balance it out into the treble.
The entire fifth floor, both sides, is finished department. And so let's just walk through this floor here. You can see now they've just been sanding a lid. Here's rubbing a lid. This is going to be a satin. She's rubbing it with steel wool. So this is a walnut finish. Anything we put finish on, we put up here. You see what we would call leg tops. They're going to get finished and then they will be glued together with the bottom part of the leg later on. So here, for instance, you can see one that they've done some of the buffing. They sand it till it's flat and then they buff to get the polish. That's the satin finish. So let's go over and look at the spray rooms now. Kind of the point here is you build up finish until none of the wood grain shows. And so a zero grain finish is kind of an expensive finish, but it's been the standard in the piano industry for 100 years, or actually more like 200 years. You can smell the finish. It's basically the smell of polyester, but these have all been sprayed. Once all of the case parts are on, we actually take it back apart and we buff, or we do what we call final polish, where now we make it look like a brand new piano. Inevitably, as you go through the process, the little scuffs and scrapes happen. So what we're doing here now is taking all of that out and we're buffing and polishing it so that it looks like a completely new instrument, which would be satisfactory to a new customer. Try out a concert grand.
Oh,
This is a 9'4".
look at this. Oh my gosh.
Listen to this.
Wow.
That's what a concert grand does.
Right, I can see, because you don't get that from a regular upright.
No, you don't.
Now, who buys most of your pianos, or where do you sell most of your pianos?
Basically, we sell Mason and Hamlins to professional pianists. Like any good instrument, it has its own voice, it has its own tonality, and so a real musician won't just buy a brand name. They'll play pianos till they find one that speaks to them, and those are the people who buy Mason and Hamlins. And we can get them in a variety of finishes. The fancier finishes cost more than the simple black, but probably 90% of what we make is black, right? We make either a satin black like this or a polished black like that, but 90% of what we make is black. We've been entrusted with the responsibility of bringing back one of the world's finest instruments. As such, we feel a great obligation to the musical community and those who have loved Mason and Hamlins. Haverhill has been really quite good to Mason and Hamlin over the last 25 years, and we intend to be part of Haverhill for many years to come.
Just sitting at one of those grand pianos will make you feel like you're at Symphony Hall. Mason & Hamlin welcomes individuals and groups for factory tours. For more information, call 978-374-8888 or visit masonhamlin.com.